Um, but cool. So it's episode 32, No CMO podcast. I've got Leslie Smith here from McMormick, LA. She's the author of a great marketing book, Laws of Promotions, the quintessential marketing guide. We're going to be getting into a lot of different areas of small business. You know, we had a pretty engaging conversation, I think, a few weeks ago when we were kind of coming up with the concept for this. I think a lot of similar ground, you know, that we've covered as far as some of the trends out there, some of the things people are doing, some of the things they're attracted to that are maybe not so much worth it. So I think this is going to be a super interesting episode as far as just really delving into some of the, you know, bogus, you know, kind of misinformation that's out there as far as marketing goes. And that's, you know, something our audience obviously loves to hear about. So, you know, before we kind of get into that, we like to give everybody a chance to kind of break down their background story of how you came to be. So, you know, how did your business career start?
So I have a degree in communications, emphasis in advertising. And so I worked for an advertising agency. That was my first job. We specialized in shopping center advertising. Nice. And then I moved into association management. And I liked that a little bit more because it wasn't just limited to advertising. So I did public relations, I planned events, did a lot of different things for a local association, then moved to a statewide association. And both of those are pretty much structured. Associations are pretty much structured like any nonprofit, where you have a committee structure, a board of directors, and then they're populated by small businesses. So worked for a local association of realtors and a statewide association of engineers. So I learned both sides, and small businesses and nonprofits both struggle. So I was getting married in 1994 and was moving from Sacramento back down to Long Beach. Mm-hmm. And I said, I hadn't had my job in Sacramento for very long. And I'm like, I have to go through the interview process again and all this stuff. And I wanted to keep that job. And my boss just didn't want me to be remote because it was 1994. That was
not the same time. Yeah.
Right. And so I moved down. My husband goes, just, you know, what would you want to do in 5 years? Okay. And I said, start my own business. He goes, well, what's stopping you? I'm like, a computer. Right. We can get you a computer. So I started my business as a consultant, media relations, public relations consultant, went to the Chamber of Commerce breakfast every single Wednesday morning and went back to the people that I had done volunteer work for and said, hey, I'm starting my business. If I can help you with PR. And so a foundation that I had worked with hired me on for a 4-month stint as an independent contractor to help them with their PR, as well as, you know, some back end administration kind of stuff for the events, but it was all the things I'd been doing. Okay. So that worked out. The planning was perfect. And then a couple other people are like, oh, can you help us with this? Can you help us with that? And this was pre-social media. Yeah. So your main channel for communicating with people were flyers. Right. I produced flyers all the time. Okay. So, and then just found another agency that was larger that needed people to do just the community relations piece of government agency work. And so I started doing that, really liked it, kept doing that. And, you know, now 2021, and I've been a generalist in PR. I've helped all sorts of different agencies, general, you know, gosh, it covers the gamut, real estate to aerospace, all over. People are like, you don't list your clients on your website. I'm like, yeah, it doesn't make sense.
It's just going to confuse people.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, so, you know, I simplify things as much as possible. I tend to do a great deal of media relations. I love writing marketing plans for people and being really creative and then helping them implement it over a year. And I like to say that I make communication simple.
Got it.
So, and that really covers the gamut of everything I do.
So going back a little bit there. So your entrance into the marketing world per se was when you kind of, you know, had that, you know, personal crisis, I don't know, just like spur of the moment type decision to start your own business and go after that. Before that, you noticed obviously that you have like a skill set in terms of maybe not PR or marketing per se, but, you know, storytelling, branding, which I think a lot.
We didn't call it that then.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't as organized. Yes, it is maybe now.
And it's interesting because people tend to tell the wrong story. And you see that a lot with nonprofits because it's a development director who ends up getting saddled with promoting their nonprofit.
Yeah.
And so what they want to promote is come to our event and so we can make more money.
Right.
And they need to talk about their mission. This is the difference we're making in people's lives. This is our founder and why he's passionate about this. And so, helping them develop those stories is what's valuable. And I wrote for 2 years, I wrote for a weekly paper here in Long Beach. And that helped too, because it was interesting to see what people would tell a reporter. And it's like, oh, they need help. they don't know what to tell a reporter. And so if the article's as good as the reporter is curious. So it's interesting helping them with their key messages, helping them weave that into an effective press release that is almost ready-made.
Okay. Yeah. So I get that. So that kind of brings me into like my first kind of marketing question, which is, we work with a lot of PR agencies, a lot of, I think, agency owners like tune into this. Starting with that kind of first company that contracted you to do everything for them, did they have awareness of that they had a PR, they had a marketing problem, or was that something that you kind of had to explain to them and bring to attention?
Well, it was another PR agency. And so it was easy for them. They didn't want to bring on an employee for something that was going to be 1 year.
Yeah.
And then hope they had more work for that person. So they could bring me in just to do that component, which wasn't 40 hours a week, just to do that part, pay me hourly. And then we ended up doing that contract, got renewed for another year. And then we did a couple other agency work things. And it was good. It was healthy work. It got me out there, taught me more about being a subcontractor to firms. And I did a great deal of subcontractor work over my career. So,
okay. I guess so. After that engagement, how did things kind of evolve for you as a business?
Yeah. So I stayed home based, and that was in 1994. Right. Home based was brand new. And so I stayed home based because my husband and I knew we wanted to have kids, and I wanted to be the number one caregiver. Makes sense. When they were born, I had a child in 99 and a child in 2002. And so then my business cut back a bit, but I had things that didn't matter what time I did. So I did the Chamber of Commerce newsletter. I was contracted to do that. And so as long as I could communicate with email with people and get articles, and I could write and edit at any time. So I could do that during nap schedule and after they go to bed. It's one of those kinds of situations. Yeah. And it worked fine. I couldn't do the community relations work that I had been doing, being a face on the project and communicating with merchants about their street being widened, that kind of stuff was off the table. So I just sort of, it was like a stream, right? My career is sort of a stream. So we're going to go over here and we're going to stay over in this cove for a while. And we're going to be doing newsletters and other things that less face-to-face. And then as the kids got older, then we're going to move over here. We're going to do more face-to-face, and we're going to do facilitation and workshops and public speaking. And so it just keeps going. And it's interesting because of COVID, that's when I really got back to working strictly more with small businesses. They were struggling so much, right? And I had been doing, at that time, I had been working with a lot of government agencies that all got deployed to work on COVID. And so I'm like, okay, not doing that now. So rather than twiddle my thumbs, I wrote a book, reached out and started doing a lot more networking with small businesses to try to help them, pivot, kind of sick of that word, but reimagine, find that bright light at the end of the tunnel. How are they going to emerge from this? What else can they do? Discovering there's always another way to do things. You look at how we use technology now, and we quickly adapted to a Zoom world.
Sure. Right. Yeah. Within like a few months, pretty much.
Right. So, yeah.
Cool.
So, and what happens too is I've been teaching classes for a long time for nonprofits, and they tend to interchange the terms marketing, PR, and advertising. They think it's just, that's marketing. I'm going to buy an ad. That's marketing. It's like, okay, well, back up. Let's go into,
what does that really mean?
What does that mean? And so what is your product? Dive deep in what your product is. The people who do well can explain what their product is in a couple seconds, right?
Yeah.
Even if they do a lot of stuff. I do PR, I do marketing, I also do facilitation. Well, I can bundle that up and say I simplify communication, right? So that's what they need to do, is find that common denominator that explains everything they do, or just find one lane, and I think that's just easier. People know how to refer you, people know how to explain what you're doing, and then move into your price and your place. Where are you doing this? How are you doing this? How much are you charging? Do you want to be an elite brand? Do you want to be the bargain basement pricing?
Yeah.
Which is it?
Yeah.
And then develop that way. So if you want to be an elite brand, you have to look like an elite brand. You have to have a brand spanking new website that works well, right? You cannot have this thing that looks like it was done in 1999.
Yeah.
Right. So, and then get into promotion. And people tend to skip that part, especially now because social media is so prevalent and they think that's all they need to do.
Do you find that, obviously small businesses, they might be a lot more focused on the bottom line in terms of marketing activities than necessarily a rebrand. So it's kind of like, how do you get them to, ultimately it's better for them if they do that rebrand, address the fundamentals kind of before they do any social media, whatever the, marketing channel is. But, how do you actually convince them of that?
Yeah. And sometimes they're like, well, I can't do that because I don't have money. Right. So that's what the small business faces. So sometimes they're game. Okay. So what can you do for, less than $1,000? It's like, well, let's just change your logo. That's the first start. And sometimes they don't want to. Years and years ago, I had a guy, he was a plumber, but this is somebody I met at the Chamber of Commerce, and I was doing a flyer for him. And he goes, I really want to promote the heating and air conditioning. Way more money. I'm not as dirty, all these things. And so I said, sure, let's do a flyer. We're promoting your heating and air conditioning. But he had this logo that had him holding a plunger. And I said, you can't use that logo. And he got mad. Well, which is it? Yeah. So sometimes they're just resistant to change, or they're not realizing the double messages they're sending that are holding them back. Like if heating and air makes you more money, then don't be so tied to your little caricature logo. That's just silly. He's like, but it's on my truck. I go, but that's okay for now. Eventually you'll change that. But right now, change it on your business card and change it on this flyer that is talking about the heating and air conditioning, because the plunger doesn't go with that. You don't use a plunger for that. Right. So, just clearing up those disconnects. And that's very common.
Is the major piece of branding change, obviously, is the website, right? But do you see it as also being there in certain cases, right? You have your LinkedIn, especially if you're a business owner whose business depends largely on your own personal reputation. So, are you getting into doing the personal branding side of things as well, and trying to get them to rework that?
For some, it's inextricable, because they are a consultant who also does public speaking or training. And so their personal branding is totally entwined with their business marketing. So, and there's ways to do that. I mean, if they need to bifurcate their website, click right if you want me as a trainer, turn left if you want my consulting services. And so walking people through that. I'm working on a website right now that's very similar to that, working on the copy for it. And people get that now. It used to be, that was kind of foreign, but now there's so much more of that. It's more common that people have sort of this, thought leader hat, and then they also do some consulting, or they have a class, an online class or something. So it's more common than it used to be, which makes it easier, because people don't get as long as you can maneuver through a website logically. People
it's
don't
laid out in a way.
Right. Like, where do I go to this?
I mean, I kind of look at it as like there's two sides to it. One is just the initial impression, where you either get the sense this is a company that doesn't really care about their branding, and they have an old school site, and, maybe they do a lot of collateral. They get a lot of, customers from other sources.
You're right.
Or you get the sense that they're really like investing in the branding and sourcing. But then the second piece of it is actually, how easy is it for me as like the cold lead to figure out what this company does and why it's actually relevant to me?
Yes. And you see, there's so much messaging for, the sales funnel, right? Yeah. You just plug that in and you're going to get 2 million entries on Google for the sales funnel and how to do it. And, they'll start with, it's a funnel, right? So you're going to get as many people as you can looking at your stuff, and then you're going to wean that down into your sales. I like to look at things as no wrong door. Okay. So if somebody sees my book, and then they can go to my website and they can enroll on my list, right? Or if somebody sees something that I posted on Facebook that they're, one of our mutual friends liked, then they can go there and click and go in there. So, and maybe that's still a funnel, but there's multiple channels. It's not just one. So, but there's people multiple have a hard time. Yes, multiple entry points. And so if they go they want to see what it means to be a facilitator, and they go to my website and they find that, then they can go, oh, she does PR too, which, it works out.
I think in some sense, you can't necessarily force people to take a certain path. You can just kind of put it out for them, right? Like a lot of people, are doing like a ton of content marketing efforts, whether it's Facebook, a book, etc. And you have people, right? They read that, or they engage with that, and they get value from it. Mm-hmm. And then the question is, it's almost, it's less so like whether you hit them immediately with like an email, or whatever the marketing funnel step is. It's more so like, how does your content tie back into what you offer? Exactly. And if it's very clear, like if you read a blog on something that's very relevant to your business and your problems, and then the person at the end references what they do, it kind of naturally leads you into the product or service, versus an unnatural way where you just read something, then you get an email about something that's totally unrelated.
Right. Yeah. That disruptor kind of mechanism. Yes. Yeah. So when I launched my book, a lot of people are like, oh, you're going to have to make it free for a week. I'm like, I'm not going to do that, because a book publisher wouldn't tell you make it free for a week. But the sales funnel people will say, you got to make it free for a week, and your list better be huge before you launch a book. I'm like, no, I want to treat my book as much as a list generator as my list is a sales tool for my book. Yeah. And so I'm like, I want that asset. I want to be able to promote it for anything, that it's not just, you've seen that where they do the, the pre-sales, and then it's free for a while. Yeah. Right. And so they get a big push at the beginning, and then there's nothing else. I mean, it fizzles out. Right. If I made it free for a week, that might be all of it, and I won't make any money.
Yeah. Right. Or, it's at least with the book things, and it is the case for any other like ebook offer or like webinar summit type thing. Mm-hmm. It's like if you use that free lead magnet type concept too much, you almost like end up devaluing you and the product. So if they're getting it for free and it's this lead magnet, then they look at everything else as like an extension of that. Whereas if you were charging for it initially, maybe not as many people would get it to begin with, which is not often the case. Mm-hmm. But they're going to look at it, if they're paying for it, they're looking at it as more of something that has value. Right. And they implement it, I feel like, as well.
Right. And you could always, later you can make it free for an hour or something.
Yeah. I mean, if somebody emails you and says, I would really like to read this or go through it, you can give them like a free ebook, but you don't necessarily, you don't put it out there for everyone, because you're trying to get people on an email list.
Right. And it's not an expensive book. It's meant to be a very concise guide. It's not a 200-page book. It's a 50-page book, and it's $4.99 download and $9.99 for the printed. And it's as much a workbook as anything else. Mm-hmm. So I think it's worth $5 for my 26 years of promotional
for sure. Yeah.
experience. Yeah.
So I guess that kind of brings me to my next question, which is, we're talking about lead magnets and some of like the sales funnel, marketing trends or things that are pushed to small businesses. And you could talk about this in terms of your experience with nonprofits, with small businesses, with the agencies, but what are like some other, hyped up marketing strategies or ways of being that are proliferating?
Yeah, I think that's the main one really is, you get 30,000
whole content
followers kind of thing. And I think what happens is they have to be realistic about how many people they're able to convert. So until those Facebook followers come into their restaurant, buy their product, order their product online, get at least a free consultation with them or call them, they're not really their clients yet. Right. Yeah. So you don't really know why they're liking you. So you have to be able to, you want to make sure you're fishing in the right lake, essentially. Right. And so are those people qualified customers of yours? And so you need to be realistic about the tools you're using. People forget about newspapers. They're like, oh, that's just old media. Well, it's traditional media. And even a blog, a magazine, newspapers give you that third-party vetting. They add legitimacy to who you are. So sending out a press release doesn't cost you a lot of money. And then getting a nice, review about what you do, that then you can use that in your social media. Right?
Any other on the website, wherever. Yeah.
Right. And it gives you legitimacy, and it gets your name out there beyond the content from people who are already liking you. And so I've had a lot of inquiries from social media companies. They're like, we've created all this content and we're talking to the same 5,000 people all the time. So we need to go beyond that, or the same 300 people. So can you help us with some media relations? Can you help us get out there? Yeah. And it works. This was an interesting thing that happened recently. So I sent out a press release to my local editors that I was publishing this book. It got picked up in 2 weekly, bi-weekly neighborhood newspapers. Okay. Each one of those warranted me a PR client to do some media relations. And one specifically said, I want to be on TV. Right. I said, great. So we sent out a press release. I called it the trifecta. So we get a weekly newspaper. People try to put their nose up at those, but they are worth gold. The weekly newspaper, a daily newspaper, and a TV camera came out. So she's on network news. She got calls, it converted well for her for a pretty small investment. So it was worth it. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think, the social media piece, I find especially like the nonprofits are like very, it's weird with the audiences because you really can't tell if they're anywhere near a customer. Same thing with the restaurants. It's like, are they even local or, to your area or not? So it's very hard to attribute, actual value from like a social media effort. So it's curious kind of why they're, I think it's more of like a validation type thing, just like you would have like a 5-star review or whatever the mark is, and social media is kind of another mark and a score that you can look at, but it doesn't necessarily equate to business value.
Right. And they forget to look at their analytics. Their analytics are so important. They may be very surprising. You don't know who you're attracting. You have an idea. This is my product. This is who it's for. And then you find out it's a totally different group is interested in it. And you're like, why? Well, they're using it in a different way, or they're using it there. You think, oh, this is for young men, but actually who's buying it are the girlfriends or the wives, the mothers, whatever. And so you're like, oh, we need to be talking about this differently. I have a product. It's a wardrobe card. So you put it on your hanger and then you write down what you wore. So you don't wear it to the same thing every time. Right. So this will say that I wore this blue turtleneck on this podcast and this necklace. I'll jot that down. Then I'll know the next podcast I do. Don't wear that. Right. Yeah. And it was interesting. My analytics, for me, it's like women my age, over 40, way over 40.
Don't need to get into that.
analytics show girls as young as like 13, 14 were interested in it.
Okay. Yeah. So
It's
you
very
really
interesting.
Yeah.
And it's not a hot seller. It sells a little, but and the people who buy it love it. It takes a certain kind of person who wants to organize their wardrobe like that. But it was interesting. I'm like, oh, that young. So it's interesting.
Unrelated question to that: how do you deal with a company or a product offering that has more than one audience that they're not necessarily overlapping?
Sure.
Like
So
two discrete demographic groups, just like you're kind of referring to.
Yes. The what I like to say is you have the same key messages, but it's in the same brand, but it's different conversations. So for instance, if something bad happened in your family, you have a different conversation with your spouse than you have with your children. But the message is the same. So it's still the same messaging. You just may use a different channel. So for instance, something that I find out it's skewing younger, then I want to be on Snapchat or do a TikTok, that kind of thing.
Right.
Which was interesting because it was all online. So those girls couldn't buy my product.
Yeah.
So you have to have the infrastructure for it to work too. If they don't have a credit card to buy this, and what difference does that make?
Right. You can't sell it.
So you have to have the infrastructure in place to target those audiences. But, there's tons of data out there that tell you exactly what the demographics are of each different channel. If you're trying to reach women my age, you want to be on Pinterest. If you want to reach, men, you may need to go someplace else. And how you photograph things are going to be different. So if whatever your audience is, you want them in your photos. Make them identify with that. Oh, okay, I can use that way.
Yeah.
Right. So go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say, do you think a lot of companies, they're kind of unaware that they're screwing that up?
Yes. Right. You have to, that's the first thing that I do with any organization, nonprofit or business, is say, let's look at what you have so far. What do you have? What's working for you? What are you able to change? What can you do? And then let's build on that and correct things if we need to. So if you're not hitting the right person, you need to figure out, is your product viable? Is it something that people really want?
Yeah.
Or is it just at the wrong price point? Or are you selling it in the wrong place? Or is your promotion just wrong? And so it's easiest just to go back to those 4 Ps. And I like to do a SWOT analysis 360. So people within the organization, as well as their constituents, if it's a nonprofit, maybe their grantors, businesses, maybe 2 or 3 people that they did work with, 2 or 3 people that they are currently working with, and 2 or 3 people who said no to them, who went another way. And then I'll just talk to them, SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So what are your perceptions of this business or nonprofit or whatever? And it's really enlightening what you find. And you bring that back to the powers that be, and they're like, oh, I had no idea. So then you can clear those things up. Hopefully, then they have data, then they have real testimonials, and they have concrete information that they can go, okay, so this is where the disconnect is.
Got it.
Yeah.
Cool. Kind of switching gears a little bit. So let's get into the book, Laws of Promotion. How did that come about? How did you end up, writing it? What was the genesis of that?
Well, here it is. Newton's law. So this harkens back to the 90s. I used to do workshops for chamber, Women's Business Council or Small Business Council, whatever. And I took Newton's 3 laws of motion and turned them into 3 laws of promotion. And so a body at rest stays at rest, or a body at motion stays in motion unless acted upon by an outside force. So very simply put into, marketing terms, promotional terms, you have to get moving. You can't just sit there. You can't stagnate. You can't say, well, built a website. Now just let them come in. It's not magic like that. You have to move your feet. You have to put yourself in motion. You have to be doing things. You have to go out and meet people. And after you meet people, you have to follow up with those people.
Right. Otherwise.
Or what good was it? Then the second law is mass equals force times acceleration, which, yes, science. Oh no.
Oh no.
But what that simply means is whatever your size is, you have to have your force needs to be large enough to meet what your goals and objectives are. So if you're trying to make $60,000, you don't have to do as much work as you have to do if you're going to raise $1 million.
Got it.
So you just need to adjust accordingly. And people forget that. They forget, or they became painfully aware of it, because you get to that part where you're like, I can't do any more, but I want to raise more money. I want to make more money. And they have to get to this part where they're going to move out of their house or their garage, wherever they started their solopreneur business. And then they have to move into, an office where they have overhead, they have all these other expenses, and they need to hire at least one other person. And now they have workers' comp and blah, 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 blah. Right. And so they have to make a lot more to make that jump. And then it's going to be leaner for them until their income catches up to them. So that's one of the pain spots I see a lot for people. They want the better website. They want to be, doing more, but they don't have money even for a consultant to do that. And then the third law is, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction.
Okay.
So what you do can come back to you, right? And so you want to be always staying positive and doing good. So good things are coming back to you. And so if you don't like the science part of it, if that makes your eyes roll back in your head, there's a case study. And the case study in there is an imaginary craft brewer who builds a business. And so it walks you through how those laws are attached to each phase of that person's business and how he wants to grow. And then he has a crisis situation. And rather than pushing back with some negative news, he turns it into a real positive and makes it a win-win. So, and then there's forms in here. It's very simple. I wanted it to be very accessible, not intimidating. A lot of marketing books are very intimidating. They start using a lot of jargon, a lot of terms that you feel like you need an MBA to do it, or, a marketing degree, and they're long. They're 200 pages. They're like, I don't have time to read 200 pages. I need to know what to do now. So, I mean, there's drawings in here, and there's downloadable forms that you can get on my blog. And so it really is a workbook, essentially. So I wanted it to be the 1-minute manager of marketing, right? Like, here are the simple principles. And it's not rocket science. It is not Newtonian physics. It's simple. So
what have you always been? I mean, obviously you're a writer, but have you always had the intention to write a book, or like how that? Because I think a lot of marketers are, they have wisdom to share, but maybe they're a little hesitant to get into writing and self-publishing and all that.
Sure. Well, I have always wanted to write fiction. And I've written a couple of manuscripts that are, they've been circulated, and, no bites from any agents or anything. And I wanted to put this together from that old workshop that I used to do. I'm like, there's value in that. I think it was a good way to explain it. There's value in that. Everybody will tell you, write what you know. I'm like, well, I should get this down on paper. And so I took the time off that I had in COVID and wrote it, and decided to self-publish it because I could do it almost immediately, instead of waiting for an agent. And business books are tough. The editors and publishers will say, do you have a 30,000 person list? Because we want to make sure that this sells. There's a lot of business books, and it's hard to break into that. But for me, I wanted to be able to have something when I do my workshops, and when I meet with a small business person who maybe can't afford me and has some gumption, or they have a daughter who's, an up and coming promoter. And you go, here's a book. You can read this. It's very accessible. Chambers of commerce. I would love for every chamber of commerce to give every one of their new members this book. Just to say, you have to get it, because that happens with chamber membership. People go, well, I joined the chamber. I didn't get any business. I didn't get anything out of it. Well, what'd you put into it? Did you go to the meetings? Did you go to nope, didn't go to a thing, but I didn't get anything out of it. Well, okay, so you broke law number 1. Body at rest stays at rest. You can't just write a check and expect it all to happen. You have to, body in motion stays in motion. So you have to go to those networking meetings, even if they're online, and you need to participate, and you need to meet people, and you need to follow up with those people and cultivate those leads that you meet. And they may not turn into business right away, but maybe it's down the road. And it may not, you meet somebody, they put you in these breakout rooms. This is how it works these days. You go in random breakout rooms, and maybe they don't have a need for you themselves, but a friend that they know, they can refer you. So they become that referral source. And you need that. You need a network. So you need people who use you, who will repeat, all over, right? And refer you.
Yeah. Cool. So what I mean, we talked about some of the things that, some of the wrong paths that I think like small businesses go on as far as marketing. Do you think as a whole, how are small businesses doing in terms of marketing?
It all depends on the owner, right? So I've seen some people that I'm like, okay, your mindset needs to change. Right? They need to be more proactive, and not, there are some who will take that tact of, well, I joined the chamber and didn't work for me. Well,
they use it as a justification basically to not pursue further.
Exactly. Instead of saying, yes, I went to the chamber and I'm eager to meet all these new people, and I'm going to use this and refer people, etc. And I'm going to maybe join more than one chamber, or, go to as many of the free things as I can, kind of thing. And then there's some who are extremely savvy. And we saw a lot of people just rise up in the last year. Well, I can't do this, but what I can do, and what I can use my, cutting, my sewing room for, making masks. I can use my, whatever they have, they figured out a way to use it. Cocktails, there was a bartender who, out of work, bars are closed. And so they created these mixers that they deliver to you. I'm like, this is awesome. Right? It's like
you get it for New Year's Eve or something.
Right. This needs to stay. Right. So just, there's always another way. And the people who believe there's always another way do well. And that's a mindset.
Yeah.
That's just a mindset. And there are horrible stories out there. I know people are really struggling, and I'm sorry for them. And it's hard for them to go, sure, so it's always another way. Thanks a lot. But there are jobs out there. It may not be the job that you want. I feel horrible for the hospitality industry together as a whole. That's a really tough. But then, grocery stores, they needed people throughout all of COVID.
Sure.
They were constantly hiring. So there were jobs, just maybe not the job you wanted, maybe not, I don't know. Flexibility is key. Consistency is key for businesses. Really need to be consistent, be out there.
Yeah. I mean, if you broke down the 3 laws, which I think are kind of more foundational, but what are like 3 immediately actionable steps that, maybe some small businesses can take that are getting killed? Not necessarily, let's not say getting killed, but let's say that are struggling.
They're struggling. Well, I think they need to be very clear about what it is. Go back to the 4 Ps. Okay. That's sort of my mantra. So what is your product? If you can't sell your product right now, because, well, actually we're heading into a place where we're starting to reopen, but if you are closed, then how could you? And you saw tons of people move to delivery systems, right, where they couldn't have it before. So what is your product? And repackage your product. So if people aren't buying the same kinds of meals, create a family pack. And you did see some of that, create, a couple of pasta dinners and a salad and, some Coca-Colas, 2-liter bottle of sodas or whatever, and package that up for $35. Do something that you still make money. I'm very cognizant. Sometimes people discount things so much as a lost leader, and then everybody counts on that lost leader, and they didn't make enough money. but look at your product. How can you repackage it so it's worthwhile? There was a restaurant that did everything sous vide. So everything was all packaged in its plastic, and all you had to go do is, just put on your grill real quick.
Yep.
And so very smart. Your price. So when you're repackaging that, who is buying this, and are they struggling? And, if you can, do some cause marketing in that. So if you can say for every $50 you spend, we're supplying a free meal to a family, who's struggling, people would support that. So, if your prices could be a little bit higher for that, because they know they're covering that other meal for some other family. Right. So that's a fun thing to do.
Way around,
helpful. Right. And people want to be able to help. And then product, price, place. So where are you offering this? So if you were inside a mall, how else can you do that? Can you do a pop-up somewhere? What else can you do? And so where are people going? And can you get permission to do something else there? I know so many things that were either in homes or in malls, places that just weren't accessible anymore, amusement parks. So where else can you be? How else can you utilize that? And then get into your promotion. Is there a way that you're promoting it wrong? There's a restaurant that they took, because everything's delivery and you're basically creating a virtual restaurant on Grubhub and the different delivery services. Doesn't matter what the kitchen is. So if the kitchen's a burger place, but you can offer breakfast burritos, and we just call it breakfast burritos are us or whatever. And you can turn those out and deliver in the morning, and then close that part down on your delivery. And then you open back up for your burgers for lunchtime, whatever. And that's a really smart way to use your facility.
Yeah. Why do you think some companies don't think outside the box like that? Is it just they don't have it internally? They're kind of just like beaten down, or what's their mentality?
Yeah. So the inflexibility, maybe stubborn or arrogant.
Yeah.
If they don't want it, sorry, I don't.
Right. There's no way you can deliver that outcome for them.
Right. And you have blockers sometimes that just like, no, this is what we do. And it is important to know what your lane is. But when you're talking survival, how else can you package up whatever you're selling? It's hard.
Any, you said you kind of refocused on the small business aspect after the kind of COVID came in. Any like inspiring stories or particular companies that you want to share experiences?
No, just those couple that came out of the book promotion.
Got it.
They were able to still do their business, especially the one in particular. It's a after school learning company. And she was able to stay open. And so,
oh, wow.
Yeah. Which is really great. And so, and I think probably people assume that she wasn't able to, although she had most of her clientele, but you're not thinking of where else can my kids go, which maybe we should be thinking, where else can my kids go during COVID? Yep. Like here's another couple hours after their Zoom time that they can actually see other kids. She had them separated and, not close together, but
sure.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think that the ones that have been really flexible have been, admirable. And I saw a lot of restaurants that streamlined their
operation because of it.
Yes. Yeah.
Definitely.
That was smart too. You don't have to keep as many supplies.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, people who look at it more as an opportunity, both in that aspect and other aspects, it seems to be more of like a mindset thing than like a skill level or a, general knowledge based.
Right.
But cool. So, I mean, where do you see yourself focusing in the months to come as, things reopen? Are you going to go back into maybe some of the more nonprofits, government associations? What?
Yeah, they're opening back up. So I'm doing some more facilitation for some of the different health initiatives through the health department. And then I'm teaching my nonprofit class is coming up in May for a 6-week marketing class, and it'll be fully Zoom this time.
Okay.
I taught it last year. The last 3 weeks, half of it was online when COVID hit. And so this year will be all online because now they have a much larger reach. And that's another benefit of the technology is it's no longer just the people who can commute by 9 o'clock. It's the people who can turn on their computer by 9 a.m.
Yeah.
So that's starting. And then I'm going to have a webinar, free.
We'll link it. Yeah.
April 21st, and it's not up yet. So if you go to my website and sign on to my list, you'll be able to see when that comes up. And that's 1 hour lunch and learn marketing 101. People can ask questions and we'll go through it. And then I want to create a new volume of my book. I want to do specifically a branding guide. Again, it'll be short.
Same type of structure, probably.
Yes. And that's important. People think branding is only colors and
right, just like the mood, the spirit.
Right? I'm like, no, it goes through everything. You have to think of it's the flavor of the cake. It's not the frosting on top. It goes through the whole cake. And then I want to do some more classes for businesses. They've been very successful for nonprofits. But the businesses tend to not want to take time out. But I think using technology, we can do it a different way and be successful and have some businesses chime in. And I think they get overwhelmed. I call it marketing mania. They're like, oh, I'm on Pinterest and I'm on Facebook and I'm on TikTok and I'm on this and I'm like, and what do you do? They're trying to keep, I'm like that. You must spend your whole day on your social media. And so let's streamline that, look at where the business is coming in, if anywhere, you're spreading yourself so thin. So trying to just normalize things and let them relax a little bit.
Cool. Yeah. Cool. So one question we like to ask everybody that comes on, which is more unplanned, I guess, is what are the 3 top traits that you've noticed in successful entrepreneurs or successful organizations that you've worked with? Not marketing related, totally just personal traits we're talking about.
Tenacity. Right. They're very tenacious. They're, you tell me no, I'm fine. I'm on with the next. And along with that, they don't take it personally. They know they're searching out their perfect client. So if you tell them no, they're like, okay, fine. They move on. They don't go, why did she tell me no? Wait a minute, and get all bogged down in any rejection. There's rejection. Right. There's going to be rejection.
Yeah.
Right. Move on. So tenacity, you don't take it personal. And you don't have to be the smartest person in the room. You have to keep an eye on the bottom line. I think I think that successful people know what their goals are.
Sure.
Like, this is what my goal is. And in order to do that, I know I have to make X number of dollars and keep my expenses down to this side. And so they just, which is, if that's a quality, I guess it would be shrewd.
Shrewd. It's interesting you bring that up. I want to hear the third one, and then I'll comment on it.
Wasn't that the third? Tenacity. They don't take it personally. Okay. So, and then they're shrewd or frugal or savvy, financially savvy. Let's call it that.
A lot of the people we talk to, interestingly enough, they don't bring up that third one. The first 2 are pretty common, but they don't bring up that third one. And I actually think the third one is the biggest thing as far as people that I've worked with and I've seen personally. Like I think the other 2 are like, very important. Yeah, obviously for growth, but as far as like the one factor that's like either yes or no, it's kind of that third one is one that I think a lot of people miss. Maybe we're just more attuned to it as marketers.
That's it. Yeah. Well, you see this on Etsy a lot. Like I'll see people will, have a certain product. It's like, I know that takes a lot of time and their price point's too low. And it's something that they've already proven the concept. Like I can understand proving the concept. So you do it dirt cheap, just cover your costs, which people forget to put their time as the cost, right?
As one, yeah.
Right. And so they, they want to
And
do
it's
that to prove their
overworked.
concept.
Yeah.
Yes. And then price it, price it to make some money. And they don't, even after it's a proven concept. And it's like, that's not going to work. And
not going to work. You need the vision, you need to
right.
pull it out.
It's restaurants fail a lot because their happy hour is too good.
Right.
People just go for that and they never make it up.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's sad.
Cool. So
I wanted to mention back when you were saying what, businesses were sort of shining examples during COVID.
Okay.
There's a local restaurant who, when COVID first stopped down and their deliveries were still coming, they opened it up as a pantry. And so they had a patio and they put up another pop-up and they were selling, gallons of milk. They were selling, their produce. They were selling their toilet paper because without people coming in, they didn't need all the toilet paper they had. So, and people appreciated it so much. And they just posted in the local, group chat, so to speak, on Facebook. And they're like, oh yeah, we're selling this today. And people would go and buy it. And it was smart. It was appreciated, and they got their stuff out. What are we going to do with 20 heads of lettuce? Until they could get back to delivery and stuff. So
interesting.
Yeah.
Cool. So anyway, so we'll so obviously we'll link the webinar and everything. Anything else before we kind of wrap up where people can find you, things to look for? Obviously the book, the webinar coming up. How can people work with you if they have a PR problem? Who should be looking at potentially speaking to you, etc.?
Sure, I'd love to help small businesses and nonprofits, or anything in between. Because I'm a generalist. You can find me on LinkedIn, right? You can find me on LinkedIn, Leslie A.M. Smith. You can find me on Facebook at McCormick LA. And you can go to my website, which is McCormickLA.com, and I'll have links to all of that. And I'm on Twitter too. And so you'll find me, I hope.
No, Etsy or Pinterest, we can link just because they were mentioned.
I know.
For the wardrobe tag.
You can, actually on Instagram, I'm Leslie A.M. Smith, and my link tree is on there.
Got it. Perfect.
So go to the bio. Thank you for mentioning that. So you just go to the bio and go to that link and you'll find.
I think people are going to want that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Cool. Episode 32, No CMO podcast. Leslie Smith, thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much.